Hello and welcome to Paradigm Playbook, a podcast for entrepreneurs in the business of sports. Your hosts, Dave Kozak and Steve Cook, are business owners, successful entrepreneurs, sports enthusiasts, avid readers, and longtime friends. For years, they've read every business book on the market and built successful companies with what they've learned. This podcast will give you the critical takeaways in just 15 minutes a week. It's a quick and easy playbook for building a winning sports business. And now, here are your hosts, Dave and Steve.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to Paradigm Playbook. Steve, today we're talking about training and treatment of employees. It's a subject I don't think gets enough attention.
No, and I think too much of the old school is lingering around, and I think the new approach to employees, every generation has its changes in how employees expect to be treated and want to be treated, and how you're going to treat them to get the proper growth out of them. Mm-hmm. So I think the key is growth for you as a company and for them as an individual. And if you can mesh those two, then you've got a winning combination.
Yeah, I agree. And there's an old, I don't know if it was a quote. I don't know if Richard Branson was the first one to say it, but he said it in a way that has always stuck with me since the first day I had an employee, which was your goal should be to train people well enough to do it on their own and to treat them well enough so that they never want to. And I think that is just a remarkable thought. I had a conversation yesterday with Niall, our producer, and I said to him, my goal for him is to get to a level in production, video, audio, everything, the marketing, the putting it out there, that he becomes so valuable that I can't let him move on to the next level, which would be, major production of a major show. But I also am encouraging him to get to that point where he's a coveted resource in the environment. So quick story about Niall is he's a young guy, came to me with production experience and a history and a degree in media and communications. And to me, it was exactly what I was looking for, because I didn't know what I was getting into and how much the podcasting and the video production that we're doing, how much it would matter. It matters huge, right? Your voice is amplified exponentially when you're willing to get in front of a microphone or a video camera and things like that. The only reason I say that is because the idea when you bring someone in, whether they're experienced and tenured or whether they're fresh out of college or whether they have the skills but not all of the qualities you're looking for, there should always be a target to get to the next level. And you have to have a vision for that next level to be able to coach somebody or to be able to train somebody to get there, right?
Yeah, and I think the content that you're giving or expecting doesn't mean anything if the show's not right. If you don't get the whole thing put together and present it in a way, for example, you can demand employees to read a book, mm-hmm. but if there's a way of encouraging them and stimulating them to read the book, the knowledge they gain will be so much better. So there's a definite way of training employees that is not, just enrolling them in another college course or asking them to go to an online webinar or anything like that.
Yeah. And I think a good practice in training staff or managers or leaders is it's easy to tell people what to do, right? I want you to do this and be specific, and you can get that job done. It's harder to step back and say, hey, we need to get to this point. I'm relying on you to get us there. And I always use the analogy of bumper bowling, right? You go out with kids and the bowling ball's heavy and they can't necessarily get it all the way down the lane and ends up in the gutter a lot. And so what do? They used to float these things in the gutters. Mm-hmm. Now they have those ones that just pop up. But the idea is you're still giving them leeway across the bowling lane, but the ball doesn't end up in the gutter. And I think as managers and as leaders, bosses, and business owners, you need to be the bumpers, but you need to give leeway for growth, because I could always tell you to do the same thing over and over again. I can instruct you on what to do, but that doesn't create that intrapreneur that we talk about all the time in small business. I want someone that's thinking on their toes, someone that's thinking about the next, and you have to cultivate that thought.
So what do you think the primary expectations of your better employees are? And we'll divide the employees into, better or worse or future or not future, because you're not going to get the same results out of all of them, and not all of them have the same expectations. So what would you say they're expecting of you, which will enable you to properly deliver?
Yeah. So this is, I think, the inevitable battle of micromanagement versus leadership. And I think micromanagement is a toxic environment to be in. Leadership requires that you allow people to fail. Micromanagement is trying to prevent failure, and trying to prevent failure is nearly impossible, because if you're failing, you're learning and you're growing and you're outside your comfort zone and you're doing the right things. I think that the key is to have an employee understand what growth really is. And there's a difference between job growth and interpersonal growth, and they're related, but they're different. And so the way I look at it, I explain the employee pyramid, and there's five ranks on the pyramid. The bottom being an employee that can do the job, or maybe an employee that can tell you there's something wrong, right? That would be a level 1. Level 2 would be the employee that can tell you there's something wrong, and I think it's one of these things. Level 3 can tell you that there's something wrong. I've isolated it to one of 2 or 3 different things. A level 4 can tell you there's something wrong. It's this. Here's my potential solution for that. Now, level 5 tells you, hey, there was something wrong. We fixed it. We're all good now. And so my goal is to get people from level 1 to level 5.
So is your goal synonymous with their goal? Or do you feel like there has to be a transference of, what you're expecting to the point where they expect the same?
Well, I think a good leader asks a lot of questions.
Okay.
And so if I had a level 3 come to me and say, hey, listen, there's a problem. We've isolated it to these 3 things. My next question will be, well, which one do you think it is? And do you have any type of solution in mind? So I'm going to encourage that person to get to that next level. And then I'm going to applaud them for taking the risk and being vulnerable. Because if you don't know what's wrong and you assume it's one thing, and then you provide a solution to that one thing and that's not it, that's a vulnerability. You're putting yourself out there. And so I'm going to applaud them for making the attempt. And then I'm going to say, well, let's think about it differently. How did you analyze that information? Then I'm going to coach them on what I see as the problem if they're wrong.
So I think most of the time you get what you expect. So if you're expecting them to come to you every time there's a problem, you're going to get that. Oh. And if you answer it every time, then they'll keep bringing you problems. It's like, when I do this with baseball, that which gets rewarded gets repeated. So if they say, okay, I brought the problem, he said, thank you, got it done. That's good. That's all I have to do. But if you start expecting them to bring you the solution at the same time they bring you the problem, then you're starting to develop that employee.
Yeah, and we had a big thing in the insurance business, because insurance is a complex sequence of laws, essentially, and protections. And so I would have people come to me all the time as a sales manager and owner of an insurance organization, ask me the question. And I would just say, oh yeah, you got to do this. Oh yeah, you got to do this. And they would continuously ask the same question. And I'd be like, we talked about this. And so I got to the point where I started saying, well, where do you think you can find that answer? And I sent them back into the policy jackets or the underwriting requirements or whatever document they needed to scour to find that information for themselves. Because I realized if I kept giving the information, I would have to continue to give the information. But if I made them dig and made them feel the pain, they would understand, they would learn, and they would move on, and they'd never have to ask that question again. So I think it's a hard thing, because the idea is if they ask me, I can solve their problem in 3 seconds and we can all move on. But if I don't solve their problem, I make them go dig. They may have to take a half hour, an hour to solve something I could solve for them in 3 seconds, but never have to use that 3 seconds again nor do they ever have to ask me that question again.
So in sports and in baseball, we use a baseball example. We talk about baseball IQ, and that is the ball player. And there's a difference. You can tell the ones that have a high baseball IQ because they tend to anticipate. And so it goes beyond solving problems. It's anticipating. It's the center fielder that takes one step early on an outside pitch that he knows is coming. So it's those little things. And I think you develop a baseball IQ by expecting them to think that way. It's like, why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you do that? Or how do we get there? And if you can do that in a genuine, caring manner, I mean, a lot of it's delivery, right? Whether it's coaching, in business or in sports, a lot of it's your delivery.
Yeah, which I think is a great transition to treatment, right? So I had in my old office, I used to have a giant wall of bulletin boards, and I miss it dearly because I don't have it at my new one, but I will again. And
you taking one of those windows out?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm going to transition the other wall too.
Okay.
So on that bulletin board, I used to hang up anything that was inspirational or thought-provoking or that got me in a zone. You know, whether you can call it a thought conditioner, you can call it a vision board, whatever you want to call it. My thing was anytime I heard a quote that just was resoundingly intelligent and inspirational to a point that I could use it on a daily basis, it went on the wall. And there was one quote that has stuck with me since the first time I heard it. And it was, what you allow is what will continue. And, you know, if you allow your players to walk onto the field, they're going to continue to walk on the field. If you allow your players to throw their equipment, they're going to throw their equipment. And so, and the same goes to employees. If you allow an employee to walk by a piece of garbage on the floor or not take their garbage out, they're not going to take their garbage out, right? So, and it goes at every level. So as a leader, you have to determine what you will allow, because if you will allow it, that's exactly what will take place. And if you don't love or like what's going on and you have a different way you'd like it done, then it's your responsibility to say something. The question is, can you say it in a way that changes the behavior without coming off in a derogatory way?
And can you say it consistently to every employee, whether they're on the good side or the bad side of it? The message has to be consistent. So no podcast would be complete that we do if I didn't reference a book.
Yes.
So the book that comes to mind here is Drive by Daniel Pink. And in Drive, he digs into what is the real motivation of employees. What do they want to get out of their job? And he narrows it down. I think this is pretty brilliant, to autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And the three things, people want to have control of their lives. They want to have control of their jobs. So the more you help them learn how to handle that job by themselves and make the job as big as possible. Mastery is that they want to get better at it. So you have to provide the resources that they can dig into, whether it's reading, listening, training, lectures, conversations, meetings, whatever is going to make them better. Because ultimately they want to say, I have a question about, life insurance. Okay, here's your guy. They want to be that master. And then purpose, there's got to be a bigger purpose than just pleasing you. It's whether it's pleasing the customer, getting accolades, getting respect, a lot of that. So yeah, I like the way he divides it up. Autonomy, control, mastery, being good at it, and purpose, have a reason for it.
Yeah. So I was reminded of another story that I'll share. And this one comes from my father, who was a corporate attorney for the same company for 30 years. And all the way up to the top as a patent counsel, chief patent counsel, and associate general counsel for a huge chemical corporation. And, as all companies do, at some point you outsource legal work. and you manage relationships with law firms, and you need a law firm to come in and step in and take care of a project. And he always found it kind of shocking how the law firms work. And this is not a dig on law firms, but this is a concept.
Although we could do some of that.
We could do some digging on law firms without question.
No, we won't.
But there was a concept that he promoted daily, which was everybody makes the coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the idea in direct opposition to some of the law firms that he experienced, where the legal secretaries or the junior partners or the associates made the coffee, cleaned things, handled the grunt work. And he put forth in his division of this company that everybody makes the coffee. If you're the last person to drink the last cup of coffee out of the pot, you make the next pot, whether you're the janitor or whether you're the chief patent counsel. And he'd be in there making coffee for everybody, And I think it's that mentality that you have to strive for, that every role in an organization, is an important role. And if you take one of those roles out, you break the machine. And so from the lowest person to the highest person, pushing them to do their best work is critical. And that's part of that growth. That's part of that treatment. That's part of that development, right?
So I think, to take that same thought a step further, I think if you get to the point where you've delineated responsibilities based on thinking, doing, and responding, it's probably the wrong way to do it, because you need everybody at every level thinking. So if you don't push the decision making to all levels within your organization, then a certain group is going to assume that they're not involved in the decision making. They don't have to do that. And it comes the same way. I talk about, in my what I call my corporate job, my manager level sales managers basically can come to me with any problem. But at this point in their career, they have to have a recommended solution. I don't want to hear the problem if I can't hear a recommended solution. Doesn't mean I'm going to go with it, but I want them thinking that. And the more you do that, the more you get to the point where, you are going to take their solutions. You are going to let them make the decision. That's when they grow. And when they get to make the decisions, they are growing.
Yeah. And that's part of autonomy, and that's part of responsibility. That's part of the satisfaction, or that purpose. So we have a kind of a, I would call it a coming of age component. I don't know, coming age is the wrong thing. When you hit the level that we're looking for in our company, and it started with me making all the decisions. And then I started to say, I'm tired. I've got decision fatigue. I'm tired of making decisions. Like, this is in your wheelhouse. You make the decision. And it got to a point where if problems arose in a meeting, I wouldn't say anything. And everybody would be looking for me to say something, and I wouldn't say it. And they'd have to go back and figure out the solution and tell me what they did. And what happens when you do that, you encourage people to make decisions. And what transpires there is people start to realize what decisions need authority to make and what decisions are within their authority. Right? So if you micromanage and every decision needs to come back up the ladder to you, it slows down progress and everything. So we kind of have like a cutoff now where, hey, if it's this, or this, I need to be involved in the decision. But if it's in this category and you're the head of the department, you make the decision. And when you make it, live by it. Explain to me why you made it if it goes south, and I'll support you in making the decisions. And so now I have a lot of people making a lot of decisions, and I don't have to stress about every single decision that's made.
I think one of the difficulties with that approach, and I agree with your approach first off, but one of the difficulties is letting someone make that decision. In your mind, you have a better way of doing it, but you're going to let it ride because it's going to provide more growth, which will give you long-term business growth at the same time. Even if, you could have done it better. I had this situation just recently. So we got into building major sports facilities. So we're big jobs where we go from writing 50,000 orders to writing $1 million orders. So it's a big deal. And there's an urge in me, even at my advanced spot in the business, where this was a big one. I wanted to take it over, and I knew that I had to get out of the way, and I had to was it handled the way I would have handled it? Probably not. But in the long run, it got done. We got the job, and the person that did it is feeling pretty darn good about themselves. And there's a good chance that person stays with the company longer, which, we talk about retention. Part of it is letting them get their autonomy, mastery, and purpose. If you step in all the time, some are just going to leave and say, I may not be smart enough, but I want to do this on my own.
Yeah. Reminds me of a quote I use around my office a lot, which I think is Lou Holtz, which is, don't tell me how rough the sea is, just bring the darn ship in.
Yeah.
Right. And as a manager, that's a hard thing because you would have done it one way. The person whose job you took would have done it one way. And then you have this third person coming in who hasn't yet reached the rank doing it a different way. And if the end result is they get the job done, it does one thing that I think is critically important that we have not discussed in any way, shape, or form, which is confidence. And in all decision-making, confidence is what enables you to add influence. So I think when you have someone who maybe is doing it different than you would, if they're successful doing it their way, you're building confidence in that person to do the next one even better. Doesn't mean after the fact you can't say, hey, next time think about this. In that, and when you were in that position, they kind of had they were holding your feet to the fire about price or about delivery date or about whatever it may be. Try this line or try this tool. This always worked for me, because a lot of times I talk about the golden nugget. In every conversation I have, there's always a golden nugget. There's one takeaway. And every time we do a podcast, every time I sit down for college, there's one takeaway where I go back to my operation, my daily life, and I implement something we've discussed here.
Yeah. So first of all, I love Lou Holt's quote. My mentor through books, Zig Ziglar, put it a different way. He used to always say, don't tell me about the labor pains, just show me the baby, which is the same idea. But I think when you get to the point where you're encouraging and accepting and getting that, then you've made the jump from manager to leader.
Agreed.
And so that's a big point. So pretty much anybody can be a manager. You have a set of rules and you can tell people what to do. And a lot of people aspire to the point where, I want to be the boss. And I've always hated that word because it insinuates that you're going to make all the decisions and you're going to tell people what to do. When in reality, what you want to do is help everybody grow so they can, we have this discussion all the time. It's like, you're not building your business right if it can't exist without you. And the only way for it to exist without you is for you to encourage and implement the growth in everyone else.
Yeah. So two caveats there, right? A manager can be a good leader, but a manager's job is to count the activity. A leader's job is to make people want to do the activity, right? There's a difference in that. And so you can, as a manager, you can say, you need to do this. You need to make 15 phone calls, or you need to move, these cases forward. You need these 16 cases forward, report back at the end of the day. Like, that's tracking the activity. But a leader in that regard, who is also a manager, could say, hey, listen, you got these 15 cases. My bottom line on those 15 cases, it looks like it's going to be, $150,000 of business to the company. Let's go get it. What can I do to help you?
I heard a leader that was having difficulty with getting results, and everybody was coming up, and everybody, one of the rules at the company was to have, your 10 most important, your top 10 every week. And he started getting people coming back that said, the top 10 never changed. And I worked on them all week, but I didn't close them. So he changed it. He changed the goal from, if they've been on the top 10 for 2 weeks and you haven't closed them, then they have to come up with a new top 10. So it's setting the rules of performance so that they kind of mandate growth. You've got to get better at this just because that's the expectation. And if that goes around the table in every meeting and everybody is responsible for closing their top 10, and it's, it's whether in sports, whether it's teaching a curveball or learning to do a backflip or whatever it is, you have to get the performance out of everybody along the line.
Yeah. And I'll, two stories, change up versus the curveball, right? I always teach the change up first because it's a static hand position. You don't have to manipulate your wrist or anything, and it doesn't cause injury. And in order for me to teach someone a curveball, they have to prove mastery of the change up first, right? And it's that close idea, like close out the change up, then we'll move on to the next one. Because if you try and teach a curveball and a change up at the same time, what do you think the kid's going to practice? Curveball every time, right? It's more exciting. It's not a better pitch, never a better pitch, but it's more exciting to throw because the ball moves. So your story about the 10 close, right? We used to operate on a top 25. They had 25 prospects, whatever. And I didn't care if it was property and casualty insurance, life insurance, annuities, mutual funds, just college-bound clients or anything. We always had a top 25. I used to manage the top 25 religiously. I had to have 5 add and 5 off every week. So my top 25 was constantly revolving. And, the numbers 5 through 25 moved up. And I focused on the first 5 and I focused on adding the next 5. Well, when I tried to teach the use of the top 25 to my staff, top 25 was the same names all the time. And I'm going, well, how long has that been on your top 25? Like 4 weeks, but I'm still talking to them. I said, so are they wasting your time? Well, I don't think so. I mean, it's a good prospect. I said, the dollar amount on that prospect doesn't make it a good prospect. Your willingness to continue to talk to someone doesn't make them a good prospect. What are the buying signals? What are all the things that you talk about in sales? So I went from a top 25 to a 10 close. So now you had to produce a top 25. And the rule of the 10 close was it was the 10 people off of your top 25 that you were going to ask for business or remove from your list that week.
Right.
So now they had to come and present the 10 people that they asked to close, show me how many people closed, move them off the list. And it just changed the dynamic of the whole thing. So
yeah, I love the concept, and it may not apply all the time, but I was talking to a general manager of a car dealership. So that's another long story, but anyway. And so, I was asking for because it seems like car dealerships all do the same thing. They get you to a certain point. They know how much discount then they give, but for dramatic effect, they say, well, let me go talk to my manager. So it appears more like a concession. So this general manager said what they do is they get a prospect, they get to keep it for 1 week, and then they pass the prospect to the next person. Yeah. So you're losing the opportunity to close. So it just adds a little bit of an incentive to act now, to add urgency to what they're doing. And sometimes, it's whether it's reading a book or closing a customer, you have to have some kind of urgency to get it done. Hence a book club is, we're covering chapter 10 next week, so you have to read it. So you're putting urgency in there. And I think in learning, as you create training in your business, having a schedule for it and having, a reason to get it done now doesn't say, I'm going to take a course someday. That doesn't cut it. Yeah.
No, and I think the key to any of that stuff is making sure that the timestamp exists, right? This needs to be done by this, which is another thing I'll talk about. And I think we'll end it with this, but deadlines are a real thing. Right. And so if you think about the idea of training someone on a deadline, if you think of the 10 close list, that's just putting a deadline to it. Right. I have had people just, hang in there with someone who was never going to buy something from them or never going to be a part of their organization. And they talk to them and they waste hours and they don't value their own time. They don't put a price tag on it. And so when the first time you realize that you're worth $200 an hour and you've spent 15 hours with someone and you go and have never done a piece of business with them, and they're tire kickers, whatever you want to call it, that changes perspective right there. Right. So I think deadlines are a huge thing. And I like to set aggressive deadlines because I think people don't understand what they're really capable of until their back is against the wall, right? Parkinson's law is the task given will take the time allotted, which is another way of saying people will procrastinate until the deadline's there. So create the deadlines, follow the deadlines, work towards them, right? I do my best work under pressure.
So a lot of leaders do better work under pressure. Another book, Procrastinate on Purpose, is what some leaders do. But the deadline is called a deadline for a reason. And it's because the opportunity, theoretically dies at that point. So if, the first of the month is your deadline, then it's no longer your opportunity. So that's why moving it to someone else, or resetting it. But that's a learning experience too. If you're not reacting to deadlines or acting to deadlines, then you've got some growth to do. So it becomes more of the training process. But I agree with you that you have to set deadlines from the very beginning. In the beginning, say, okay, we got to get this done by this. I'm learning in the podcast business, the deadlines for this, we got to have a topic ready, be ready to go, when it's scheduled to do. You can't say, well, I'm going to get to studying that next week. It's now. We do it now.
100%. All right, everybody, we have exhausted our time today. I think it's great subject matter, Steve. Obviously, training and treatment is huge in the growth and the kind of moving people forward. And I think it goes to culture too. Yeah,
and it's what is going to make our businesses grow. Yep. Everybody that's listening to this now, all the entrepreneurs out there know that if you grow the people within and keep the good ones, you're going to grow your business.
Absolutely. All right, guys, have a good day.